Captain Jake Sullivan was drinking his third cup of coffee when the universe changed forever. He stood on the bridge of Horizon Station, Earth's newest orbital defense platform, watching the blue marble turn slowly below. The morning shift had just started, and Amy Rodriguez was running her usual checks on the communication arrays when every screen in the command center lit up with an impossible signal. "Captain, you need to see this," Amy called out, her voice tight with confusion. She was the best communications officer in the fleet, and Jake had never heard her sound uncertain about anything. The signal coming through their deep space receivers was unlike anything in their databases. It was organized, mathematical, and definitely artificial. Jake moved to her station and stared at the scrolling data. The patterns were too complex to be natural, but too simple to be random noise. "How long has this been coming in?" "About 30 seconds, sir," Amy replied, her fingers dancing across her controls. "It's coming from way out there, past Pluto's orbit. The signal is strong and getting stronger." Within minutes, every communication station on Earth was receiving the same transmission. The signal carried embedded translation protocols that slowly began making sense to human computers. Jake watched as the alien words formed on his screen, each one carefully chosen and polite in a way that made his skin crawl. "Greetings to the inhabitants of the third planet," the message began. "We are representatives of the Galactic Council, a peaceful alliance of 12 species who have worked together for thousands of your years. We have detected your radio transmissions and wish to welcome you into the greater galactic community." Jake read the message twice before its full meaning hit him. Aliens. Real aliens were talking to Earth. He immediately activated the emergency protocols and within seconds was connected to Admiral Frank Morrison at Earth Defense Command. Morrison's weathered face appeared on the screen, already grim with understanding. "You're seeing this too, Admiral?" Jake asked. "Every station on the planet is picking it up," Morrison replied. "I've got the President on another line and she's asking for answers I don't have. Keep monitoring and record everything." The alien message continued with what sounded like standard diplomatic language, but Jake noticed something troubling in the word choices. They spoke about guidance and supervision and peaceful integration in ways that suggested these were not optional offerings. The tone was pleasant, but the underlying message was clear: submit or face consequences. Amy looked up from her station with wide eyes. "Captain, they're asking for a response. They want to know if we accept their offer of membership in their council." "What exactly are they offering?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. Amy scrolled through more of the translated text. "They want us to surrender all military assets and place Earth under council authority for our own protection. They say this is how all new species join their alliance. They claim it's for the greater good of galactic peace." Jake felt his jaw tighten. These aliens had been watching Earth, and they thought humans would just roll over and accept alien rule. They had no idea what they were dealing with. He thought about every war in human history, every time someone had tried to conquer someone else, and how that usually worked out for the conquerors. "Sir," Amy continued, "they're giving us 30 days to comply. They say this is more time than they usually allow, but they understand that primitive species need time to adjust to new concepts." The word primitive hung in the air like a challenge. Jake had studied military history, and he knew that every successful conqueror in human history had made the same mistake. They underestimated their enemy. These aliens were about to learn a very hard lesson about human nature. "Admiral." Morrison's voice crackled through the communication system. "All stations maintain normal operations but begin implementing Protocol 7 immediately. I want every piece of data about these aliens recorded and analyzed." Protocol 7 was Earth's contingency plan for first contact with hostile aliens. It assumed that any advanced species making contact would likely be a threat and should be treated accordingly. The protocol called for gathering intelligence while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian operations. Jake watched as more alien ships appeared on their long-range sensors. 12 vessels, each one massive and clearly built for peaceful purposes rather than war. They moved slowly and broadcast continuously, announcing their peaceful intentions and their desire for diplomatic contact. To Jake's trained eye, they looked like sitting ducks over the next few hours. The alien messages became more detailed and more condescending. They explained how their council had brought peace to the galaxy by eliminating warfare between species. They described their successful integration of 11 other worlds, all of which had gratefully accepted council protection and guidance. The aliens, who called themselves the Galactic Council, sent detailed information about their society. They had evolved beyond conflict, they claimed, and spent their time on art, science, and peaceful exploration. War was a primitive concept that civilized species had abandoned long ago. Amy translated their historical records, which showed how each species had joined the council. The pattern was always the same: first contact, offer of membership, acceptance, and integration. Never had a species refused their generous offer of protection and guidance. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "I don't think they understand what humans are like." Jake nodded grimly. The aliens had studied human radio and television transmissions, but they had completely misunderstood what they were seeing. They thought human wars were primitive displays of aggression that would disappear under proper alien guidance. They had no concept that humans might actually enjoy fighting, might choose conflict over submission, might prefer to die free rather than live as subjects. President Helen Carter's response came through official channels, 6 hours after first contact. Her message was brief and diplomatic, thanking the aliens for their offer and requesting time to consider their proposal. What she didn't mention was that every military base on Earth was already preparing for war. Jake stared out at the stars and wondered if the aliens could see Earth's military preparations from their distant ships. Probably not, since they seemed to think that threatening an entire planet was a reasonable opening diplomatic move. They were about to discover that humans had been preparing for this kind of fight their entire history. The 30-day countdown had begun, but Jake suspected the real countdown was much shorter. Earth would not surrender, and when these peaceful aliens realized that fact, they would learn what human warfare really meant. The universe was about to become a much more dangerous place. Ambassador Veltar studied the holographic displays in his comfortable quarters aboard the council ship Peaceful Dawn. The data about humanity scrolled past in neat, organized patterns that matched every other species integration he had overseen. In his long career, humans appeared to be a typical pre-space civilization with the usual territorial behaviors and primitive social structures. His assistant, a young Zephyrian named Calumet, sorted through 3,000 years of council records. Every species had followed the same pattern when offered membership. Initial resistance lasted only days before sensible leaders realized the benefits of joining the galactic community. The humans would be no different. "Ambassador," Calumet said, pointing to a section of human transmissions. "Their entertainment. Media shows frequent conflict scenarios. Should this concern us?" Veltar barely glanced at the data. Primitive species often create fantasy scenarios about conflict as a way to release territorial stress. Once they understand the benefits of peace, these displays will disappear naturally. The Council's behavioral analysis team had spent weeks studying human broadcasts. Dr. Qualin, the galaxy's leading expert on primitive species integration, had submitted a detailed report concluding that humans were simply another aggressive, young species that would mature under proper guidance. Their military displays were nothing more than ritualized posturing. On the bridge of Peaceful Dawn, Captain Morthick reviewed the integration timeline. The standard 12-ship observation fleet was more than adequate for monitoring human compliance. Previous species had never required more than symbolic pressure to accept council membership. The massive ships served mainly to demonstrate technological superiority rather than actual force. Their response should arrive within days, Morthick told his crew. "Prepare the standard integration protocols. We'll need housing prepared for their leadership delegation and translation matrices for their primitive languages." The Council's confidence came from unbroken success. The Altarian oceanic civilization had surrendered their small defense fleet without firing a single shot. The crystalline Vorthan had submitted after a brief demonstration of Council technology. Even the warlike Kethrin had accepted membership once they understood the economic advantages. Dr. Quailin transmitted her final analysis to all Council ships. Human behavior patterns match standard pre-integration profiles. Their territorial displays and competitive behaviors are typical of species at this developmental stage. Integration success probability, 97%. Meanwhile, in the deep scanning bays of the Council ships, automated systems analyzed Earth's surface. They detected the obvious military installations, cataloged the primitive nuclear weapons, and dismissed the threat level as minimal. Their sensors focused on major population centers and government buildings, standard targets for peaceful occupation. What the Council scanners missed were the things that made humans truly dangerous. They saw soldiers drilling in obvious locations, but not the civilians who knew how to fight. They detected military vehicles, but not the factories that could build more. They found government bunkers, but not the distributed command systems that could function without central authority. Back on Earth, General Chris Murphy stood in a bunker 300 feet below the Colorado Mountains. Around him, dozens of officers worked at computer terminals, coordinating with military units across the globe. The 30-day deadline gave them time to prepare for the kind of war the Council had never experienced. "What do we know about their ships?" Murphy asked Colonel Pete Johnson, his intelligence chief. 12 vessels, each one designed for exploration and transport rather than combat, Johnson replied. Their weapons appear to be crowd-control devices meant for suppressing riots, not fighting wars. They've positioned themselves in standard diplomatic formation with no tactical considerations. Murphy smiled grimly. The aliens had made their first mistake by treating this as a police action rather than a military operation. They had no idea that every human military academy taught courses on asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, and fighting technologically. Superior enemies. Dr. Karen Walsh led teams of scientists in analyzing every detail of the alien transmissions. Each signal was recorded, studied, and reverse-engineered. The aliens had given humanity 30 days to surrender, but they had also given them 30 days to learn about alien technology. Their communication systems use quantum entanglement arrays, Walsh reported to the military leadership. If we can build even crude versions, we could disrupt their coordination completely. Major Steve Collins coordinated with resistance cells that had been training for decades. Every major city had civilian groups that knew how to fight using improvised weapons and urban terrain. The aliens expected to find helpless populations ready for guidance. Instead, they would find millions of people who considered the invasion a personal insult. The Council's peaceful nature was their greatest weakness. Their ships carried medical facilities, diplomatic quarters, and cultural exchange centers. They had no armor, no military-grade shields, and no experience with enemies who would rather die than submit. Their crews had never been shot at and had no training for actual combat. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez continued monitoring alien communications from Horizon Station. The Council ships broadcast constantly, sharing peaceful messages and offering additional time for human leaders to consider their generous offer. They seem genuinely confused by the lack of immediate response. They keep asking why we haven't accepted yet, Amy reported to Captain Sullivan. They're offering trade benefits, technological advancement, and protection from other threats. They really think they're doing us a favor. Sullivan studied the tactical displays showing Council ship positions. They're sitting in perfect formation for a synchronized attack. No evasive positioning, no defensive screening, no backup plans. It's like they've never considered that someone might actually fight back. The aliens had spent so long in their peaceful galaxy that they had forgotten what war really meant. They thought of conflict as something that happened to primitive species, not something that could happen to them. They had no concept of strategic thinking, tactical planning, or the human ability to weaponize anything available. As the days passed, the Council grew more confident. Human governments maintained normal communications and showed no signs of panic. The aliens interpreted this as acceptance of their inevitable membership in the galactic community. They began planning celebration ceremonies for humanity's peaceful integration. They had no idea that humanity was not preparing to surrender. Instead, every military force on Earth was preparing to teach the galaxy's most peaceful species exactly why their ancestors had once feared the darkness between stars. The 30-day deadline arrived with all the ceremony of any other Tuesday morning. President Helen Carter stood in the White House Situation Room, surrounded by her military advisors and a direct communication link to every defense installation on the planet. At exactly noon Eastern Standard Time, she activated the global communication network and delivered humanity's response to the waiting galaxy. To the representatives of the Galactic Council, Carter said, her voice steady and clear, humanity thanks you for your offer of membership in your organization. After careful consideration, we respectfully decline. Earth will remain independent and free. We wish you safe travels back to your homeworlds. The message was broadcast on every frequency, transmitted through every satellite, and sent directly to the 12 Council ships waiting in Earth's outer system. Then, exactly as planned, every human communication system went dark. Satellites powered down, radio transmissions stopped, and Earth became silent as a tomb. Admiral Kreshtan aboard the Council flagship Unity of Peace stared at his communication displays in disbelief. In 3,000 years of first contact operations, no species had ever simply said no and then disappeared. His translation officers worked frantically to confirm they had understood the human message correctly. Perhaps their communication systems failed, suggested his aide Velinara. Primitive technology often breaks down under stress. Kreshtan nodded, accepting the logical explanation. Send landing parties to their major population centers? They're probably in confusion and need our guidance to restore order. The Council had protocols for this situation. 12 ships launched smaller craft toward Earth's surface, each one heading for a major human city. The landing parties carried medical supplies, food, and translation devices. They expected to find frightened populations grateful for alien assistance after their governments had clearly collapsed. Captain Ben Foster crouched behind a concrete barrier in downtown New York, watching the alien shuttle descend toward Times Square. Around him, 50 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division waited in concealed positions throughout the surrounding buildings. The aliens had chosen to land in the most obvious location possible, completely ignoring basic tactical considerations. Remember, Foster spoke into his radio, let them land completely before we engage. We want their ship intact for intelligence purposes. The alien shuttle touched down gently in the middle of the square, its hull gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. A loading ramp extended and 20 Council peacekeepers emerged, wearing light armor and carrying what appeared to be non-lethal crowd control weapons. They moved in a tight formation, heads turning constantly as they searched for the human leaders. They expected to meet. Foster waited until the aliens were 50 meters from their ship before giving the signal. 50 human soldiers opened fire simultaneously from concealed positions in every direction. The aliens, completely unprepared for coordinated military resistance, fell within seconds. Their light armor was designed to stop rocks and small projectiles. Not military-grade ammunition. The same scene played out in London, Tokyo, Berlin, and 8 other major cities around the world. Council landing parties arrived expecting to find confused civilians and instead encountered prepared kill zones, manned by professional soldiers. Within 30 minutes, every Council ground force on Earth was either dead or captured. Sergeant Claire Newman led her squad through the wreckage of the London landing site, systematically collecting alien weapons and equipment. The Council technology was advanced but clearly not designed for warfare. Their weapons had stun settings and crowd dispersal modes, but nothing that could seriously harm a determined enemy. These aren't soldiers, Newman reported to her commander. Their gear is more like police equipment for handling protests. I don't think they've ever been in an actual fight. In orbit around Earth, the Council ships detected the loss of their landing parties with growing alarm. Admiral Kreshtan stared at his tactical displays. trying to understand how 12 separate missions could have failed simultaneously. The humans had demonstrated coordination and military capability that contradicted every analysis in their files. Captain Drew Patterson stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, humanity's first true warship designed for space combat. The ship was crude compared to Council technology, built from retrofitted cargo vessels and armed with modified nuclear missiles. But it had something the Council ships lacked: a crew that understood warfare. "Alien vessels are maintaining standard formation," reported Patterson's tactical officer. "No defensive positioning, no combat spread, they're sitting ducks." Patterson smiled coldly. "Launch all missiles, target their command ship first." The Liberty fired everything it had at the Council flagship. Dozens of nuclear-tipped missiles streaked across space toward the Unity of Peace, the Council ship's defensive systems, designed to deflect small meteorites and space debris, were useless against coordinated military attack. Admiral Kreshtan watched in horror as his ship's hull began to crack under repeated nuclear explosions. Warning alarms filled the bridge as life support systems failed and structural integrity collapsed. He had never experienced combat before and had no training for this situation. "Return fire," he ordered desperately. "Sir, our weapons are not designed for ship-to-ship combat," his weapons officer replied. "We only have crowd control and planetary survey equipment." The Unity of Peace died slowly, its peaceful crew struggling with systems they had never needed to use in anger. 3 other Council ships suffered similar fates before the survivors realized they were facing an enemy unlike anything in their experience. Commander Rita Adams led a wing of modified fighter aircraft into space, their engines straining against the vacuum but their weapons ready for battle. The Council ships were massive and slow, designed for comfort rather than maneuverability. Human fighters swarmed around them like angry insects. Targeting sensor arrays and communication systems, the aliens tried to establish communication with the attacking humans, broadcasting surrender offers and requests for negotiation. The humans ignored every attempt at peaceful contact. They had made their choice and were committed to fighting regardless of the consequences. Back on Earth, intercepted Council communications revealed the aliens' growing panic. Their peaceful nature had left them completely unprepared for enemies who chose warfare over diplomacy. They had expected gratitude and received violence. They had offered membership and received rejection backed by military force. Major Tony Clark studied captured alien equipment in a secure facility beneath Denver. The Council technology was incredibly advanced but clearly built by people who had forgotten how to fight. Everything was optimized for cooperation and peaceful interaction. "Their mistake," Clark reported to his superiors, "was assuming we would react like every other species they've encountered. They don't understand that humans are fundamentally different." The first day of war ended with 8 Council ships destroyed or disabled and hundreds of alien prisoners in human custody. The survivors retreated to the edge of the solar system, sending desperate messages back to their homeworlds. For the first time in their recorded history, the Galactic Council had encountered a species that preferred war to peace. Dr. Coylin stared at the human prisoner through the transparent barrier of the medical bay aboard. The Council rescue ship Haven of Mercy, Corporal Nick Davis sat calmly on the examination table, his hands secured but his expression relaxed and almost cheerful. The alien psychologist had studied hundreds of species but had never encountered anything like the human mind. "You killed 17 of our peacekeepers," Quallen said through the translation device. "Your people destroyed 8 of our ships. Why do you seem pleased about this?" Davis shrugged casually. "Because we won. Your people came here thinking they could push us around and we proved them wrong. That's always satisfying." The aliens' tentacles curled in confusion. Every other species showed remorse, fear, or desperation. When captured, this human acted like he was discussing the weather. Quillen had interviewed survivors from the London landing site and found the same disturbing pattern. Humans seem to enjoy conflict rather than endure it. "But your species will face retaliation," Quallen pressed. "The Council has vast resources. Surely you understand that resistance is pointless." Davis actually laughed. "Lady, you people don't understand the first thing about fighting. You came here with crowd control equipment and expected us to roll over. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. This is what we do." In another section of the ship, Dr. Ellen Price sat in a comfortable interrogation room, lecturing her alien captors about human military history. The Council's intelligence officers had requested information about human warfare capabilities, expecting to learn about primitive tribal conflicts. Instead, they received a comprehensive education in the evolution of organized violence. "Your mistake," Price explained to the gathered aliens, "was assuming that warfare is something primitive species grow out of. For humans, warfare is how we grew up. Every technological advancement, every social development, every scientific breakthrough can be traced back to military applications." She pulled up holographic displays showing human conflicts throughout history. "We invented agriculture to feed armies. We developed metallurgy to make better weapons. We created mathematics to calculate artillery trajectories. We built computers to break enemy codes. War didn't hold us back, it drove us forward." The alien officers exchanged worried glances. Their own species had abandoned warfare before achieving space travel. They had assumed this was the natural order of technological development. The idea that a species could advance through conflict, rather than despite it, was alien to their understanding. Commander Veltar reviewed the psychological profiles his teams had compiled on captured humans. Every subject showed the same patterns: competitiveness, aggression, and what their analysts termed tactical thinking disorder. Humans automatically analyzed every situation for potential conflict and seemed to enjoy overcoming obstacles through force. "They treat warfare as entertainment," Veltar reported to the Council emergency session. "Their captured soldiers request access to their military history books for recreational reading. They discuss battle tactics the way other species discuss art or music." The Council chambers on the homeworld of Zephyr Prime filled with representatives from all 12 member species. For the first time in millennia, they faced a crisis that threatened their entire way of life. The human rejection of Council membership had shattered their fundamental assumptions about galactic civilization. Ambassador Herlonex of the Vorthan Collective presented crystalline probability matrices showing potential outcomes if humans develop interstellar travel using their current military mindset. The probability of galactic conflict rises to unacceptable levels. They represent an existential threat to peaceful civilization. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Colonel Pete Johnson oversaw the interrogation of captured Council soldiers. The aliens were cooperative to the point of helpfulness, providing detailed information about their technology, their society, and their military capabilities. They seemed genuinely confused about why humans would want to keep fighting instead of accepting peaceful surrender. "They don't have military secrets," Johnson reported to General Murphy. "They don't understand the concept. Their entire civilization is built on open cooperation and shared resources. The idea that we might use their information against them hasn't occurred to them." Dr. Karen Walsh led teams of scientists through captured Council equipment, reverse engineering, technology that had taken the alien centuries to develop. The Council's peaceful nature meant they had built everything for efficiency and cooperation rather than security. Their computer systems had no passwords, their weapons had no safety locks, and their databases contained complete technical specifications. "It's like they've never heard of information security," Walsh reported. "Their technology is incredibly advanced but completely unprotected. They design everything assuming the user has good intentions." Major Steve Collins coordinated with resistance cells around the world, integrating captured alien technology into human military systems. Council energy weapons were modified for maximum lethality rather than crowd control. Council communication devices were reprogrammed to jam alien frequencies. Council medical equipment was studied to find biological vulnerabilities. The most disturbing discovery came from the psychological evaluations. Human children in refugee camps had turned the alien invasion into playground games, acting out battles and competing to see who could devise the most effective tactics against imaginary aliens. The Council's child psychologists reported that even human offspring showed competitive warfare instincts. Captain Jake Sullivan monitored long-range communications from Horizon Station as panic spread through Council space. Reports from the Earth. Conflict had reached every peaceful world in the galaxy, causing the first widespread fear the Council had experienced in thousands of years. Species that had forgotten why their ancestors built weapons were suddenly remembering old nightmares. The breaking point came when Major Tony Clark led a boarding party onto the Council command ship Harmony of Ages. The operation succeeded not through superior technology, but through pure audacity and tactical creativity. Clark's team used Council transportation technology against its makers, appearing inside their most secure vessel and capturing their command staff within minutes. "How did you penetrate our defenses?" Admiral Morgan asked as human soldiers secured his bridge. Clark smiled grimly. "What defenses? You people left your doors unlocked and your guard down? Any human teenager could have figured out how to break into your ship." The Admiral's species had evolved past deception and betrayal millions of years ago. The concept of using an enemy's trust against them was incomprehensible. They had built their entire civilization on the assumption that all intelligent species would eventually embrace cooperation over conflict. As news of the successful boarding operation spread through Council space, the galaxy's peaceful species began to understand what their ancestors had forgotten. Predators existed, competition was possible. Some species were born to fight, to expand, to dominate. The humans had reminded the galaxy that evolution sometimes rewarded aggression rather than cooperation. The Council faced a choice that no peaceful species should ever have to make: adapt to a universe that contained warriors, or watch their entire civilization crumble before the advance of a species that had never learned to stop fighting. The emergency session on Zephyr Prime had been running for 3 straight days. Representatives from all 12 Council species sat in their traditional circle of peace. But for the first time in their recorded history, the chamber buzzed with an emotion their ancestors had forgotten: fear. The holographic displays showed tactical analyses, casualty reports, and probability matrices that painted an impossible picture. High Counselor Thekvar of the Altarian Federation spoke first, his aquatic breathing apparatus bubbling with nervous energy. "In 72 hours, a single primitive species has inflicted more military casualties on Council forces than we have experienced in 3 millennia. Our peacekeeping doctrine is completely inadequate." The crystalline representative of the Vorthan Collective projected probability cascades into the center of the chamber. The mathematical models were stark and terrifying. Current data suggests human military adaptation occurs at exponential rates. Their integration of captured Council technology exceeds all predictive parameters. Threat assessment. Maximum. Ambassador Veltar stood before his peers, his diplomatic career in ruins after the greatest failure in Council history. His final report lay open before the Assembly, each word a condemnation of their fundamental assumptions about intelligent life. "We believe that all species naturally evolve toward peace and cooperation. The humans have proven this assumption fatally incorrect." On Earth, Colonel Pete Johnson walked through the research facilities that had sprung up around captured Council technology. Human engineers worked alongside alien prisoners who seemed eager to help their captors understand systems they themselves had built. The Council's peaceful nature meant they felt genuine guilt about the conflict and wanted to help minimize further violence. "Their weapons technology is centuries ahead of ours," Dr. Nancy White reported as she demonstrated a modified Council energy rifle. "But they designed everything for stunning and crowd control. We've modified this one for maximum lethality and increased the power output by 300%. Johnson nodded grimly. The aliens had given humanity the tools for interstellar warfare without realizing it. Every captured ship contained detailed star charts, communication protocols, and navigation systems. The Council had accidentally provided Earth with everything needed to take their conflict to the stars. Admiral Frank Morrison reviewed tactical reports from around the globe. The remaining Council ships had retreated to the edge of the solar system, sending increasingly desperate peace offers that Earth's leadership ignored completely. The aliens seemed genuinely unable to understand why humans would continue fighting when offered favorable surrender terms. "They're broadcasting apologies," Morrison told President Carter during their daily briefing. "They claim the entire invasion was a misunderstanding and they're willing to leave Earth alone if we agree to non-aggression pacts." Carter shook her head. "Too late for that. They threatened our planet and attacked our cities. We don't negotiate with invaders." The president's response reflected something the council had never encountered: humanity's complete rejection of submission regardless of consequences. Other species calculated costs and benefits before choosing resistance. Humans seemed to choose conflict as a matter of principle rather than strategy. Major Tony Clark coordinated the systematic dismantling of council vessels captured in Earth orbit. Human engineers learned more about alien technology in weeks than council scientists had developed in centuries. The difference was approach. The council built for harmony while humans built for advantage. "Their computers don't even have security protocols," Clark reported. "They've never needed to protect information from enemies because they've never had enemies. Every system assumes the user has good intentions." Captain Jake Sullivan monitored deep space communications from Horizon Station as panic spread through council territories. The news from Earth had reached every peaceful world in the galaxy, triggering the first widespread fear the council species had experienced since their ancestors abandoned warfare. Entire planets were requesting emergency defense assistance against a threat they didn't understand. The Kethran Empire, the most militaristic of the council species, had disbanded their warrior caste centuries ago when they joined the Peaceful Alliance. Now their ancient war councils were being hastily reformed as they tried to remember skills their people had deliberately forgotten. The irony was bitter. The galaxy's former warriors were terrified of Earth's current ones. Dr. Ellen Price continued her lectures to council intelligence officers, explaining human military philosophy to aliens who had never needed such concepts. "You assume that rational beings choose peace over war," she told her captive audience. "For humans, war is often the rational choice. We fight for principles, territory, resources, pride, and sometimes just to prove we can win." The council's xenobiologists struggled to understand how evolution could produce such a species. Their models showed that intelligent life naturally progressed toward cooperation and peaceful resource sharing. Humans represented an evolutionary impossibility, a highly intelligent species that had retained and refined aggressive survival instincts. Back on Zephyr Prime, the Council faced their most difficult decision in millennia. Military advisors who had been ceremonial positions for centuries suddenly found themselves planning for actual warfare. Ancient weapon designs were retrieved from historical archives. Peaceful exploration vessels were being hastily converted for combat operations. "We must consider preemptive action," High Counselor Rendell suggested reluctantly. "If humans achieve interstellar capability while maintaining their current military mindset, they will destabilize the entire galaxy." The suggestion horrified the Assembly. The Council had spent thousands of years building a civilization based on peaceful cooperation. The idea of launching aggressive warfare went against everything they had become. Yet the alternative was accepting a future where their peaceful galaxy contained a species that viewed conflict as entertainment. Admiral Kreshten, one of the few council officers to survive the Earth campaign, provided his final assessment via emergency transmission. "The humans do not fight to survive, they survive to fight. They have weaponized everything we offered them and turned our own peaceful nature against us. Retreat is not a tactical withdrawal, it is an acknowledgement that we have encountered something beyond our understanding." As the council ships limped back toward their home territories, human observation posts tracked their departure with satisfaction and anticipation. Earth's military leadership was already planning the next phase of operations. The aliens had provided detailed information about council territories, trade routes, and defensive capabilities. They had essentially drawn humanity a roadmap to galactic conquest. President Carter addressed the United Nations in a speech that would be remembered throughout human history. Today we proved that Earth will not bow to any external authority. Tomorrow we will prove that the galaxy has room for more than just the peaceful species that currently inhabit it. The final transmission from Ambassador Veltar to the Council Chambers carried a warning that would haunt the galaxy's peaceful species for generations. We opened communications with what we believed was another species requiring guidance towards civilized behavior. Instead, we have awakened something that our ancestors feared and we had forgotten could exist. The humans call themselves warriors. And after witnessing their capabilities firsthand, I finally understand why the ancient texts spoke of such beings with terror. We sought to bring them peace, and they have reminded us what war truly means. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do now that they knew they were not alone in the universe, and that everyone else was afraid of them.